and welcome back to the second Curious Rebel TV. And this week I am joined by the wonderful Rupa, who I'm going to ask to introduce herself in a few minutes, because last week I had feedback from folks who are watching to say that I didn't introduce myself, because I just imagine that everybody knows who I am. But my name is Advita Patel, and I am the CEO and founder of Comms Rebel, if the sign behind me doesn't give it away. And we work with organizations to help them revolutionize the way they communicate inside and out, so we can help people thrive in their role. And Rupa is part of my collective team and helps me with all the copy and publicity side of Comms Rebel. Welcome, Rupa.
Hello, Lorraine or Advita. I'm not sure what to call you.
You know what? Last week I said Lorraine, but now I'm thinking Anita Rani.
Oh, I love that.
I know. Yes, why did it like Lorraine is great, don't get me wrong, but hello, South Asian woman who's smashing it out there, Anita Rani. So I'm channeling the Anita Rani now. Maybe not as cool as her style, but we'll get there. But yeah, if Anita's watching, hi Anita, like love you. So Rupa, tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and also a little bit more about your business as well.
Sure. Well, thank you first of all for having me. It's a pleasure to be on episode 2 of Comms Rebel, Curious Rebel TV. So a little bit about me. I'm Rupa. I'm the founder of Rupa Bharadva Comms. Rupa Bharadva Comms, put simply, it's a consultancy. I work with businesses of all different shapes and sizes. I help them get clear, consistent in their messaging, whether that's to their people, their employees, their customers, or even their stakeholders, so the media. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. I'm really lucky to be working with, obviously, Comms Rebel for the last few years. So working with Comms Rebel on all things copy related, so whether that's the website, blog, and also email marketing as well. So yeah.
And I think it'll be really good for folks who are watching to understand how we connected. So it was about 2.5 years ago now, right? It must have been about 2.5 years ago. And I was looking at getting some support for Comms Rebel in terms of helping me with copy and things like that. And then your WhatsApp message just came into my onto my phone out of the blue, saying, oh, if you know anybody that needs any support with copywriting and publicity stuff, then let me know. And I was like, oh my goodness, like literally in that moment, I was like, I need to find somebody who gets what I'm about or what I do. And you just appeared in my phone. And I told you on that day, like, oh my God, I was just kind of thinking about this. So the universe aligns.
Yeah, I think your words on that day was something like the stars have aligned. And honestly, it's as I've kind of started embarking on this self-employment journey. So for people who don't know, I quit my job last November, in fact. So I've always worked for corporates throughout my 20+ year career, and then decided to become self-employed earlier this year. And a lot of my decision was based around the woo. You know, I believe that, you know, once you kind of put a decision out there, things start to happen. And I've been really lucky, actually, that has happened. Of course, there's lots of hard work along the way. But, you know, reaching out to you on that day just happened to be one of those decisions. And look where we are 2.5 years later.
No, honestly, I love stories like this. Like, you know, that I am a big believer, those who don't know, but I am a big believer in stars aligning and things coming in your way. If you put the intention out there, it comes your way. And I think we definitely have that between us. So you've had an incredible journey. I remember us sitting in El Gato Negro in Manchester when we were talking about you potentially leaving your full-time employment and setting up on your own. And it's been wonderful to see you kind of find your path and, you know, what that looks like for you, and working with so many other incredible folks out there. But when we work together, we always talk about how do we create engaging copy, right? And how do we make sure that people are paying attention to what we're saying? And the same applies to whether we're working on our business and making sure that we're bringing the right clientele, but also internally when we're communicating with our colleagues and also externally with our consumers, right? How do we create this engaging copy and making sure that we are tuning in with what's going on? Because we're living in a world where there's so much content that we are consuming, so much content every single day. What are your kind of top tips to bring out that engaging copy? What would you say that we need to do more of?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's something that, as you said, you know, from small business owners to kind of leaders within, you know, huge companies are kind of grappling with, because it seems like our attention spans are shortening with things like social media. You know, we don't like something or it doesn't engage with us, we can scroll and we can kind of move on. So, you know, I think copy can actually really help us to engage with our audiences. I think my number one tip is to know your audience, whether that's an internal audience, whether you're talking to, you know, a team or colleagues, or whether it's customers. You know who those people are. Where do they hang out? What do they read? You know, what kind of jobs do they do? You know, when do they actually stop and scroll the internet, or do they not scroll the internet? Do they go on their computer? Do they scroll on their phone? What's their kind of habits? You know, is it literally a quick scroll in the morning and then kind of that's it for the rest of the day, or is it kind of dipping in and out? I think knowing your audience will really help you engage with them and actually understand what it is that they like to read, and therefore you can then use that to help you when you kind of start writing for that particular audience. I think the second thing is to, and it's a really easy trap to fall into, but we can write things in a kind of complex way because we feel like that's how we should write.
Yeah.
So when I went to school, you know, we were taught to write a certain way, and when we start writing for ourselves as business owners, we sometimes have to unlearn some of those things. So try and put things simply in how you would say something to a friend, for example, or even better, how would you explain something to a child? Because honestly, talking to children and trying to explain what you do is a really good way of bringing yourself down to earth. So trying to explain to like my 6-year-old what I do, you know, when I try to explain that to him in the way I think I should say it versus what he actually understands makes a really big difference. So I guess that would be my second tip.
Yeah.
My third tip would also be to just, once you've written something down, read it out aloud. And does it make sense? Do you sound stilted? You know, have you really thought about, have you crammed too much into a sentence? You know, could you make it simpler? Little things like that can really make a difference, I think. And also focusing on the words that you actually want to say. So, you know, we all have personal brands. We also have business brands if we're business owners. You know, what words do you want to be defined by? So, for example, for your business comms, rebel, you know, rebel, you know, having that rebel streak in there somehow, somewhere. You know, we don't always want to play it safe. How can we get that out in the words that we use? So, you know, being aware of the type of words that we use is really important.
Yeah. I love that. You know, what you said about making sure that you're writing for a child is so such great advice. And I spent the weekend with my 2-year-old nephew last weekend, actually, and his curious mind is so, I mean, he's only 2, but he's at that stage of asking why. And we laughed about it, and I and my cousin's like, oh, good luck with that. And I was like, you know what, but I love it. I love that curiosity. And when we write something, I will always ask folks to be thinking about the why behind it. So why have you written that? What is the purpose of that? What does it mean? What do you want people to take away from that? And what's a call to action? Like, what is the purpose of you putting that content out there? And keep that front of mind. The other tip you shared at the start around being aware of the people that you're communicating to and with is critical. You know, we're living in a world now where we have so many different demographics and so many different characteristics and behaviors that as communication professionals, or even those who are responsible for communicating as part of their job, we do need to be aware of what people consume and how they consume it and what they need from us, especially if we're cutting through that noise. So when we're talking about building inclusivity in the workplace, we will always encourage leaders and teams to look at the data that's got a hold of in terms of where are the gaps. So where are the gaps? What are people, you know, for example, are people making mistakes a lot in terms of health and safety? And if that's the case, then is it because the communication isn't working as effectively as it needs to in terms of things that they need to do? And is it because we're writing something that's too complicated, or they're not getting the right level of access? So using data points is critical, I would say. So those are great tips, definitely. And we've got a few questions coming in already. Should we do a bit of a mix of questions? So Sarah has said, reading things out loud is a brilliant tip. And if we do that, we can literally hear what our words sound like. I completely agree. There's two things I do, right? So Word have a readout thing. I don't know if anyone's aware of this, but you can have the I'll get the exact instructions how you do it, but you can have the a voiceover thing that reads out your content in a bit of a robotic fashion, but it reads it out and it picks up any mistakes that you might make, spelling mistakes, grammar issues. It tells you when the comma should be going in, that kind of stuff. But the other thing that I do that works really well, to Sarah's point, is record myself reading out my blog or the article and then replay it back to myself to see how if it sounds natural or not. So that's a really good tip. Roz has asked, if your audience is huge and diverse, what are your best methods for understanding their needs and habits? Great question.
That's a really good question. So if, for example, it's a big colleague base, for example, what data can you get your hands on? So is there like a annual employee survey, for example? What data points can you get access to from HR? Because obviously they have a mine of information. And actually that can go down into things like age group, type of workers, who, like, what kind of work they do. Talk to people as well, I think from my memories of working in internal communications when I worked for like a financial services firm, I remember walking the floors and actually talking to people and just, asking how their day is, or randomly bumping into someone in the lift and learning about somebody's job and maybe what they're kind of focusing on that day. That also helps because you can then have that person in your mind when you're writing, and actually is that message going to land? And if not, what can you do to kind of make it land? Sometimes as well, I think when you write things down, sometimes you realize that actually, does it require a massive long email? Maybe it could just be a conversation between a line manager and their team, for example. I think it's something that you can do when you write things down, and that's why I love writing, because I think it's so powerful to be able to then go back and re-edit and refine. It's one of those mediums which you can do that. You can afford the luxury of being able to re-edit, refine, get your words right. It's not like live TV where you have to kind of get it right. You have got that luxury. So my advice would be to get data, speak to people, speak to audience, ask them what they want as well. Is there an opportunity to actually do a survey or ask questions, maybe ask a small sample?
Yeah, I mean, even going to IT and seeing what the habits are in terms of intranet visits is a really good way. And I will also suggest, Roz, if you do personas, to Rupa's point, if you can create personas of the type of colleagues that you have in your organization, using these data points will help you curate information for that specific persona. So if you look at people who may not have access to laptops, for example, create a persona about that person and make them real. So Jack, 33, worked for the organization for 8 months, fairly new, hasn't got the relationships yet. What does he need to know? That kind of stuff. And you can use data points from IT, from health and safety, from HR, from your own insights as well, if you measure that in internal comms, and create personas for each different type of individuals that you might have in your workplace, and use them as a guide especially when you're communicating in a large organization as well.
Also people in your team as well. So if you're part of an internal comms team, so where I worked in an internal comms team, we all looked after different parts of the business. So they also were experts in those areas, and that was really useful as well, just to understand people's habits, how they worked, etc. So, that might be worthwhile doing as well.
Yeah. And be quite mindful in terms of the different demographics that you're talking to as well. So try and be, have a look at the people that you're kind of having conversations with and look at their demographics. So if you are a global organization, then the intercultural differences is key as well. But also people whose English may not be their native language, you know, how do they want to communicate and what's different for them? So that's why those personas, as you said earlier, are definitely useful. We've had a few more personas, a great idea, Ruth said. And Bardeep's just saying that she didn't know that you could do read aloud. That's what it's called on Word. Thanks, Larini. Just put the instructions in the chat thing in LinkedIn. Right, the other question I want you to talk about, because it's quite out there, and everyone's either, you've got two camps in this. You've got people who are like embracing it, and you've got people who are like fearing it, and that is AI and Chat GPT. So when we think about this new technology that's coming out there, it can be quite overwhelming. And I'm doing a lot of research in this space right now because I want to be ahead of the curve when it comes to AI and Chat GPT and how we can use it as communication professionals rather than fearing it.
Yeah.
What's your advice on finding your focus on this, and how do you stand out with this? You know, are you pro, or are you like in it'll go away and all that kind of stuff? Where do you stand when it comes to AI and Chat GPT?
It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it?
It is a bit of a mouthful.
So if I take you way back to last year, so 28th of November, I handed in my notice to become self-employed. So I really wanted to focus and grow this copywriting business. 2 days later, there was a massive announcement. It was all over the internet, all over the media. There was this new technology, AI, ChatGPT was launching, and basically people who had jobs like myself were going to be out of work. The robots were actually coming, and that was it. You know, there was no more need for people like me. So fast forward now to 7 months into my self-employment business, and I have to say, I really like AI. I didn't think I'd be saying that, but I actually think it's a really great tool. But with everything, there's pros and cons. My first piece of advice would be to have a go, try the technology. You can try it for free. I think it's very intuitive. So you basically put in a command. So for example, you could say something like, help me write an Instagram post about my new product launch. And then you could put some details about your product launch and it will spit something out at the end of it. What I found is that the things that come out of it are often quite similar. So the tone of voice, it doesn't really have a concept of tone of voice unless you manually put that in and say that these are the parameters that I want to set, i.e. I want it to be an informal tone of voice. I want to target this type of audience. You have to be really quite descriptive. The language that comes out can be quite complex, and it can be quite difficult to, it probably won't sound like what you want it to sound. So it can take some time to actually work with the technology and learn how to put in the command so that you get something at the end of it that's usable. Yeah. The way that I've used the technology is that similarly to what we were talking about previously, it's quite good for that kind of grammar, I guess, overview, review check. It's like a second pair of eyes. So I can put some copy into ChatGPT and say, can you review this for grammar mistakes, errors? Can you, point these out to me? And it will do that quite quickly, like within seconds. So that's really helpful. I think the other downside is that it's relying on the internet from like 3 years ago. So things have moved on and it's not always up to date. So when you're putting commands in, be aware of that, because you might not necessarily get the most up-to-date information. But I think it's a really useful tool. I think it's worthwhile understanding how it works and how you could make it work, because I can only see AI being more and more part of our lives. And I think in the future we will see, and we are starting to see that, we'll see roles being advertised where you have experience of AI technology. So I think it's definitely not something to be fearful of, but I think it's something to be aware of. And the final thing, something that I read recently made me laugh, but also made me think, treat technology with kindness. So when you put commands into ChatGPT, you know, say it in a kind way, because eventually this technology will be very much more part of our lives. So, you know, when you're shouting at Alexa, try and remember that, because at one point or another, I think technology will definitely be more and more in control of our lives, if not, more than it is now.
I 100% agree. I'm very much pleased, and thank you to ChatGPT. Thank you, please. And you're so right. You know, we have to remember that it is the data that's being pulled out from the prompts that we ask is out of date in some aspects, but also it's peppered in bias.
Yeah.
So you need to kind of remember that as well. And it depends on what you're using this technology for as well. I have seen people make some real big mistakes with it in terms of just lifting exactly what it said and not actually doing their due diligence on the sources that ChatGPT has kind of like, you know, spouted out. But it's brilliant for evoking ideas and curiosity and giving you a bit of a guide if you're feeling a bit stuck. And that's what technology should be about. It's about helping us enhance our role. And when I had at the AI panel at my conference in June, I can't remember which panelist said it now, but one of them said, it's not AI that's going to take our jobs. It's going to be people who know how to use AI that will take our roles. And that stuck with me because it's so important. And we should be embracing some of this technology that we can enhance our role and also get rid of the menial tasks that we might end up doing and actually focus on the things that we enjoy doing.
Definitely.
Sorry,
I was just going to say, we already use AI in so many ways, you know, already.
And it's existed for decades as well, AI. It's not new. Exactly. It's just now it's become more mainstream.
Exactly.
Got more access to it. That's, you know, that's the only difference with it. But, you know, if you speak to someone like Andrew Bruce Smith, he's been in the world of AI for 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And he, you know, it's just now everyone has more access to it than ever before. Christopher, I just realized I can put things up on my screen. I know. So Christopher's saying he's loving the webinar. Thank you, Christopher. Is my book available in Waterstones? Thank you. Yes, it is. And of course, a little plug. Here it is. You can get it from Waterstones. You can get it from Amazon, any online book. So you can get it directly from Kogan page as well. But he's asking, Rupa, what are your top tips for introducing a more neurodiverse workforce for PR comm sector as a business owner? Oh, that's a big question.
Oh, that's a really good question. So what are Rupa's top tips for introducing a more neurodiverse workforce for PR comm sector as a business owner? What would I say? I think if I break it down, PR is one of those things which there's always a lot of smoke and mirror around PR. And if we break it down, essentially, it's our relationship with the public. So whether that's you as a business owner or as an individual, you know, it's your kind of relationship with the public. So, for example, what we're doing right now is a form of PR. You know, we're engaging with each other, but we're also engaging with the public. So I think in terms of when you say introducing a more neurodiverse workforce, do you mean? I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
I'm making massive assumptions what Christopher's questions mean.
Yeah.
So Christopher, if you're still watching, please do feel free to expand on that. But I'm making the assumption here that Christopher means how do we engage with our neurodiverse workforce, you know, the people that we communicate with, because neurodiversity is definitely something that's been spoken about more than it ever has done, you know, before. I think it's an area where neurodivergent folks felt like they couldn't speak up about some of the challenges, especially in PR and comms, right? So if you got dyslexia, for example, you know, it was almost a shame to have that when you worked in comms, because, you know, God, how can you not write in a good way and stuff like that? So people masked it a lot, and often I feel that we as an industry don't often help that, and we don't speak about it as openly as we should be speaking about it as a group of people that should be encouraging those to live as best as they possibly can and be who they need to be. And when we think about a neurodiverse workforce, I will always say to folks that to your point, Rupa, you have to take people individually, right? In terms of what are their needs and what do they want from us. And I will always try and encourage communication professionals to have different versions of the content that they're sharing, because people consume information very differently. So some folks need time to reflect. Other folks like to have audio because they're sensitive to a lot of chaos around them, for example. You need to allow people to choose how they want to consume that information. Because I will always say, if you address the needs of the minority, the majority will always benefit. And if you're uncertain about what that population needs, and then if we go back to our earlier question, which is, find out, ask the questions, do your research, have conversation with people who are speaking about neurodiversity and neurodivergent folks, and what does that mean? Because everyone is so different in terms of what the diagnosis is. Some people have had to self-diagnose because the waiting list is so long in the UK, especially with the NHS and stuff. So people are muddling their way through it to try and find an answer to some of the challenges that they faced. And as a PR and comms industry, we should be able to support as much as we possibly can by the way we share our information to the publics that we serve or to the workforce that we support. But if Christopher is still watching, then please, expand on that question if you feel that we haven't answered it as effectively as you'd like us to.
I think as well, if you see yourself as neurodiverse, if that's how you identify as well, if you feel comfortable with sharing that aspect of you, I think see it as a superpower. How does it help you in your business? What does it give you that maybe sets you apart from other people, business owners in the same kind of industry? And that's if you feel comfortable doing that. How can you build it into your personal brand? How can you make it your story, and how do you own that story? How do you want to share that with people?
He's come back and said he did mean people who have autism, stammers, dyslexia. God, I struggle to say that. ADHD. What are the opportunities to break into the industry? 9 years at EY, have done good work, and EY do incredible work with minority groups, definitely. And Taylor Bennett Foundation also do some great work with underrepresented minority groups. Like I said, I think to Christopher's point, as an industry, and this is why when I step into as president-elect and then president for the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, one of my key promises is to try and understand how we can make our industry inclusive for everyone, and talk about some of the challenges facing professionals to enter our profession, and move away from some of the traditional sense of what you need to be a good communication professional. When I started to work in internal comms, it's all about you have to be an incredible writer. You have to be like on the dot with writing and grammar and all that. With AI now coming into our space, you don't need that anymore. I use Grammarly all the time to help me with my grammar and making sure that I'm wording things properly. So we need to encourage people to embrace some of these tools to help enhance their skills, and also talk about it more than we do right now. I know we're getting better at it, but we need to be much better to, you don't know, if you don't see leaders like you, then you believe that you don't belong in that space. So we need to encourage people to talk more about it. The Chartered Institute of Public Relations is doing some great work with Sarah Thornhurst on creating these guidelines and manuals, which we can share the link to on the chat. Actually, Doreen is still watching, and she can share the link to that, then people can access that. She just released one about events. So there's good stuff happening, but we need to be better at it 100%. We're coming up to time, but I really want to ask you one question on my 5 questions that I did for Vardeep last week. So I'm going to ask you, who is your ultimate rebel, Rupa?
That's a really good question.
Have I just asked you a really hard question?
There's so many to choose from. So I'm assuming celebrity, somebody.
Anyone. Could be someone personal to you as well.
Oh my goodness. It's a really difficult one, because I did have somebody in mind for this, but I think I've changed my mind now. I am going to say somebody that you mentioned actually earlier when we first started talking. So Anita Rani. So I love Anita because I think she's a breath of fresh air. I love watching her on Instagram, taking you behind the scenes of kind of things that she's doing. But I definitely think she is like a rebel at heart. So she is a big music fan. She is obviously on the radio, on TV. She presents Country File, etc. But she, to me, would embody a rebel because. Why? Because I think that while she's a South Asian role model, she's really shown how you can, you know, push the conventions, the boundaries. I think when you are growing up as a South Asian girl, particularly when I was way back when, you were told certain things about what you could and couldn't do. And I think somebody like Anita Rani, if she was around when I was younger, I think she would have been the perfect person to kind of go, yeah, I want to be like that, because I think she, does all those things. She knocks conventions out of the park. She's just, does what she feels right, breaks barriers.
She does break barriers,
But she also does it in a way where I feel she gives a hand up to those coming up behind her as well. So, and I think that's really important, paying it back.
I agree. Love her. Brilliant. Yeah, Anita Rani. A lot of love for Anita Rani today. Love her. Yeah, she is.
Let's get her on here. Come on.
I know, that's the mission. That is the mission. Let's get her on Curious Rebel TV soon. Definitely. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Rupa. It's been an incredible chat. And thank you for those who have submitted questions and comments. Honestly, it's really helped to enrich this conversation today. If you want to know more about how Comms Rebel can help you, then you can visit us on commsrebel.com. We have an incredible collective team who are going to be coming on being co-host with me. Next week is a solo episode with me, because I'm going to be in Portugal. Not as glamorous as you think it is, and I'll explain next week why I'm in Portugal. But I'm going to talk about confidence and a new program I'm introducing about how we can unleash our inner power and confidence as well. So look out for that next week, same time in the UK. So hopefully I will see you all then. And follow us, please follow us on YouTube, and follow us on Instagram, and follow us on Facebook and on X as well. And Rupa, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Rupa Bharadva Comms, and also on LinkedIn. Can I just do a really quick plug for one more thing?
Okay.
So myself and Vardeep, who you'd have seen last week, we've launched a podcast which is all about creative business owners, so women of colour who dare to do things differently as creative business owners. We would love for you to listen in. We're currently planning our episodes for next year, so if you'd like to be a guest and you know you've got a story to share, let us know. Get in touch.
Yeah. Courageous Collective, right? That's a
podcast. It's called the Courageous Collective. It would help if I said that. The Courageous Collective.
No, it's brilliant. And I've listened to some episodes. I've been privileged to be a guest on there as well. So definitely send some suggestions to Rupa and Vardeep of any guests that you want. Maybe Anita Rani, Rupa.
She's on the dream list.
She's on the list, right? If anyone knows Anita Rani, get her on the podcast. Definitely, she'll be incredible. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Rupa. See you all next week.
Bye.